Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to completely shatter the billion-dollar illusion behind the most expensive rock you will probably ever buy. We're diving deep into the diamond myth and exploring how one massive entity literally engineered the entire concept of eternal value. Look down at an engagement ring, maybe even the one on your own hand. You instantly feel its emotional weight, right? It's widely seen as this profound piece of the Earth's history, a symbol of eternal love, and let's be honest, it comes with a terrifying financial cost. We've been deeply conditioned to believe that these sparkling stones are the rarest, most precious items on the planet. But what if diamonds aren't rare at all? The source material we're exploring today pivots hard to a fascinating reality. Diamonds are actually among the most common gemstones in the entire world. And this perfectly illustrates the sheer scale of the illusion. The only reason that ring on your finger is so astronomically expensive is because of a literal century-long psychological operation. I mean, one single company spent 100 years masterfully manipulating global supply, demand, and human emotion just to convince humanity that a very common rock was an absolute necessity. Part 1. Global supply and controlling the market. Let's dive right into the origins of this massive monopoly and see how an oversaturated market created an existential threat. To understand how this massive bottleneck started, we really have to travel back in time. See, before 1867, diamonds actually were quite rare, mostly found in small amounts in places like India and Brazil. But then, a massive diamond pipe, basically a giant volcanic tube packed with gems, was discovered on a farm in South Africa. And the owners of that farm? Two brothers with the last name De Beer. Suddenly, prospectors weren't just finding a few stones, they were pulling up literal buckets of them. Well, basic economics tells us that if everyone has a diamond, the value absolutely crashes. They just become pretty rocks. Recognizing this nightmare scenario, a man named Cecil Rhodes stepped in. During the 1880s, Rhodes used some incredibly brutal tactics, high interest loans, and massive political leverage to buy up every single mining claim he could get his hands on. By 1888, he pulled off the impossible. He formed De Beers Consolidated Mines and essentially swallowed the entire global supply. So, the crucial question is how they managed this unprecedented control. It boils down to a concept called synthetic scarcity. Even with total control of the mines, Rhodes knew he had to aggressively control the flow of the product itself. So the newly formed cartel hoarded millions of carats in these secret London vaults. They would only release a tiny, carefully calculated trickle of diamonds each year. This completely artificial limitation created a really powerful perception of rarity to maintain those astronomical prices. They made the whole world feel like diamonds were practically running out, while secretly sitting on enough inventory to flood the market for decades. Part 2, Inventing Forever and Marketing a Necessity. Let's fast forward to the 1930s. The cartel had conquered the supply chain, but the Great Depression brought a massive demand problem. People couldn't afford bread, let alone luxury jewelry. Furthermore, shifting generational desires meant younger people were starting to view diamonds as kind of old-fashioned. The cartel was facing a total existential threat. So, in 1938, a desperate Harry Oppenheimer, who had taken over the De Beers empire, flew to New York City. He sat down with the advertising agency N.W. Ayer, not to sell them jewelry, but with one simple, chilling mandate to save his cartel: make the diamond a necessity. The ad agency knew they couldn't just sell a shiny product. They had to sell an unbreakable idea. In 1947, a copywriter named Francisca Reedy penned 4 words that would literally change the trajectory of modern marriage. A diamond is forever. We are sold this romantic ideal, right? The diamond as the ultimate symbol of eternal love. But beneath that is a hidden reality, a pure economic trap. Think about it. If a diamond is forever, it means you can never, ever sell it. By equating the stone with eternal devotion, De Beers effectively destroyed the secondhand market. They ensured that once you bought a diamond, it stayed out of the supply chain permanently. Let the sheer audacity of that psychological trap just sink in for a second. And the manipulation definitely didn't stop there. Have you ever been told that a man should spend 2 months' salary on an engagement ring? It feels like this ancient, time-honored tradition, doesn't it? Well, it absolutely isn't. That rule is a literal 1980s ad campaign. De Beers marketers explicitly told consumers, how else can 2 months' salary last forever? That number wasn't passed down from your grandfather. It was carefully calculated to prey directly on human insecurity and the desperate desire to prove one's love. Part 3. The Russian Crisis and Siberian Diamonds.
In the 1950s, the cartel hit another massive hurdle when huge diamond deposits were suddenly discovered in Siberia.
This discovery threatened to completely flood the market and ruin their highly curated narrative that diamonds were large, rare, and exceedingly valuable. The problem was that these Russian diamonds were very small, which completely contradicted the whole big rock narrative. So the cartel adapted. They absorbed the threat by agreeing to buy every single Russian diamond just to keep them off the open market. But to get rid of these millions of tiny stones, they invented a brand new product, the Eternity Ring. They completely shifted their marketing overnight to convince the public that suddenly a single diamond was no longer enough. Now you needed a continuous circle of tiny stones to truly show your everlasting love. Alongside this, they heavily promoted the 4 C's: cut, color, clarity, and carat. On the surface, this just looks like a helpful consumer guide, But in reality, it was a system standardized to make buying these shiny rocks feel like a complex, highly technical investment. By quantifying the stone's physical traits, De Beers elevated the purchase from a simple commodity transaction into something that felt incredibly prestigious and meticulously evaluated. Part 4. The De Beers Legacy and Manufactured Culture. Now, let's look at where they stand today. Their historic monopoly isn't quite as impenetrable as it once was. The explosive rise of lab-grown diamonds, which are virtually indistinguishable from natural ones, is fundamentally weakening their grip on the global supply. Yet the cultural legacy they built over a century remains incredibly powerful. De Beers didn't just build a wildly successful company, they engineered a culture. The core lesson of their empire is this: if you control the narrative, you completely dictate the world's perception of value. They proved that human emotion can be harnessed to turn a very common piece of carbon into a global obsession. Which leaves us with this final, incredibly important thought. When we look back at the immense success of this century-long marketing campaign, we have to ask ourselves, what else are we buying into? What other wildly expensive traditions do we blindly follow simply because a clever marketing team once told us to? Thank you for joining me on this explainer. I really hope this changes the way you look at the traditions around you. See you next time.